Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. We'll just take a few more minutes as people are gathering. So just a few more minutes before we start the program, and we welcome everyone, the people who have joined already, and we're looking forward to a good discussion with the panel, and I think this will be a great event. So during the event, please stay muted at all times. And if you have any questions, you can raise your hand, you can ask a question. And we will have some time at the end of the program where we will have dedicated time for Q&A. So, and I also appreciate the time the panelists have given us, and I welcome them to the program as well. So Govind, you're in San Francisco. How's the weather over there?
Hey, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Norman. Actually, it's been a little chilly here in the San Francisco Bay. It's glad to see that there's no snow on the ground, just like in Michigan and other areas that you guys see. But it's been good. I know we are over that forest fires and all the bad weather that we had here a few months, couple of months, last month. So I think we are doing much better. The weather is getting much better. It's cooler, and definitely, we don't have as beautiful of a fall as some of you have in Midwest. But definitely I'm not missing the snow.
Right. No, good. So as people are joining, I think we can start. So good morning, good afternoon, and greetings to everyone. My name is Noman, and I'm with the IndustryX. So just a quick background on IndustryX. IndustryX is an innovation center of excellence, which focuses on operational excellence with the help of empowered by advanced technologies and AI. And IndustryX is all about developing a vibrant ecosystem to foster innovation and excellence. And in this, during this development of this ecosystem, today we are very pleased. We are happy to announce our this community, the ForumX community that we are launching today. And the whole idea of this community is to bring industry leaders, professionals, faculty, students, and thought leaders together on this thought leadership platform, and to talk about industry pain points and the solutions with the help of these panelists. So today is our first program. We have two IndustryX or ForumX networks that we have launched already. One is in data supply chain, which we are talking today with our panelists. And the other one is in data science and analytics in operations. So these are the two programs that we have launched. So feel free to join these programs, join these forums. We have a very vibrant community that we have. We meet on a regular basis. And we are working on a number of projects. We're working on some research topics as well. So send us an email at info@industryx.org, or you can send me a text on LinkedIn, connect any of us on LinkedIn. So today, this event is a discussion event where the people in this forum can ask questions and they can participate in the discussion as well. But we like to ask that everybody to stay muted at all times. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. There's a chat window. You can use the chat window as well. And we have some time at the end of the program where we will invite everybody to bring their ideas, their information. And in this way, we will also hear from the people in the audience as well. With this, I'd like to introduce my dear friend and a colleague for many years, Govin, who is leading this panel today, and we appreciate his leadership in the digital supply chain network. Govin, all yours, my friend.
Thank you very much, Norman. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, and hope you all are having a great day. And first of all, I'd like to thank you, just like Norman did, for joining this webinar. As a part of IndustryX, I'm very, very excited and to be part of IndustryX and to help in transformational change that we need in the supply chain industry. Our first webinar that here we have is talks a little bit about some of the transformation that we need going forward to not just sustain and thrive in this industry. And just to talk a little bit about myself, my name is Govin, and I have about 20 years experience in supply chain manufacturing, lean manufacturing, world-class manufacturing, and now I am with a startup, electric vehicle industry, and also I'm at the same time helping develop industry leaders or processes or help in terms of technology improvement throughout. And this has brought me closer to the IndustryX here, which I'm really excited to join. So the first webinar that we have today, it talks about appropriately is digital supply chain management in the age of disruption. I'm sure you guys know because we are living in one at this time, right? So if you look at this, we are in the middle of a historic pandemic caused by COVID-19. We haven't, actually in my age, in my times, I haven't seen anything like this. This is really, really unique in the sense that this is not just a total disruption globally, but it's also has such a long duration and still continuing, right? So in terms of supply chain, since supply chain is a global community, this pandemic affects every aspect of the global economy and the global trade supply chains, as we can see. But there are some good silver lining that we see out of this pandemic. Things that we see is this crisis will accelerate the changes that has already began that people are trying to put in. For example, in terms of making themselves more efficient, more productive, using technology to improve their processes. At the same time, they will unveil some new trends and new priorities that we need going forward. Now, talking about this pandemic, this is not the first time we have had anything like this. We had a mini pandemic, what I would call, I would talk with this Toyota case study that happened in 2011. In 2011, they had 9 magnitude tsunami, earthquake in Japan, and it was followed by a tsunami. At that time, if you look at some of the Japanese automakers and a part of the global supply chain that was linked to Japan was really impacted by it. Toyota built 45% of its vehicles in Japan at that time, and their factories were closed for more than 2 months. And the Toyota subsidiaries here in the US, they had to cut their production down to 30% for months altogether. That's because many of their parts came from Japan. And I also know we were impacted too, because I was, although at that time working for FCA, we had some paint samples and paint things that came from Japan, especially from the tsunami area. And we were impacted and we had to shut down our plants, although most of our parts were kind of built and sourced from the US. So kind of many of the automakers were impacted by that. And Toyota had a severe fall in their profits, lost a lot of money. But learning from this, they also put some systems in place. for example, redundant inventory, standardizing some suppliers, not just Toyota, other Japanese too. So basically, it kind of upended their just-in-time philosophy. So kind of really doing opposite of what they're doing just to protect themselves for something quake-proofing. And they had a repeat of a similar kind of earthquakes in April, but they didn't have a tsunami. They had to suspend some production, but they bounced back much quicker within a few days. I would say it wasn't a full success, it was a partial success. And there were also vulnerabilities with this. So you can say the just-in-time is an efficient way to reduce waste, but is not resilient to unpredictable extreme events. Now, let's take the COVID-19, right? COVID-19 impact is far more widespread. I would say far more sweeping than anything we have experienced before. It has had had impact in many, many different areas. It has generally, we are all associated with industries, most of us are. It had an industrial scope impact. That means there's a severe impact on manufacturers and service providers around the globe. As you can see, procurement of raw materials or moving of the raw materials from one part of the world to another part and finished products. And you guys are experiencing the last few months, the basic supplies, toilet paper, sanitizers. Everything has been in short supply. And there's been geographic scope supply to impact too. Many of the countries with necessary supplies that they have been hoarding these supplies. They have been unwilling to share with other countries in the fear that they may need it at home. There's also been demand mismatch. In the previous disruptions that we have had, especially those high-cost goods with the high-end consumers, I would say like, luxury planes or Gucci bags or Croc things, they were always in demand. They always got sold out. But in this time, what we are seeing with this pandemic, even the high-end items are having an issue because there's a steep drop in demand. And causing many of the suppliers to be stuck with costly merchandise that's not selling. So in some cases, you have expensive, costly merchandise that is kind of, in a warehouse for months. In other places, we are so short of raw materials that we cannot build a product. And regarding the duration, usually we have seen most of the natural cause disasters and those things are short term. In this time, we have seen this has been lingering for more than 10 months, and it's very, very slowly limping back. So if you kind of summarize this in a very, very high level, at a 50,000 feet level, there is still a lack of resiliency in supply chain, right? We still see that. And there is a lack of real-time insights and transparency. Otherwise, you won't have this demand mismatch. And definitely, we see there is a lot. Many of the OEMs have been investing in technology, but we still see that there is a gap in introduction of the right technology or incorporation of technology to get through and build more resilience in supply chain. So, with this in the background, I would like to first of all introduce our panel. We have a very, very rich panel with the experience that they bring in here. And I would like to introduce every one of them. I would like to introduce them, and then they would go back and talk about themselves, their background. First of all, I would like to introduce our founder of IndustryX, Norman. Norman, if you could please go ahead and give a little bit background about yourself, what you do, and how you are associated with this transformation. Really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you, Govind. No, I appreciate that. The whole idea about founding or developing this program, this initiative, IndustryX, is to support the ecosystem in this change, because this change is too big. And we need everybody's help, our industrial friends, our faculty, our students, the government, everybody. So it's all about the ecosystem, which is fundamental. So I'm happy to be here, and with my experience and with my efforts, if I can make a change, that would be a great success for me and for all of us.
Thank you very much, Noman. Appreciate that. And next, I would like to introduce Dr. Ratna Babu Chinnam. Satyababu is the chair of IndustryX, and his associate. He has got tremendous background in practical experience in industry, and plus also he brings up the theoretical and educational academic experience. He brings it that kind of makes us whole. So Dr. Ratnababu Chinnam, please give a little bit background about yourself and how do you see your association with IndustryX or forums like that will help us get more resilience and get more stronger in terms of supply chain.
Sure, Govind. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, depending on where you are calling in. Yes, I'm a professor in the Industrial and Systems Engineering Department and a co-founder for IndustryX along with Noman. Very proud to be affiliated with IndustryX, and as Noman pointed out, IndustryX is about promoting operational excellence through advanced technology and AI. And in many ways, this is what I have been doing for 25 years, assisting companies in the automotive industry, in the healthcare industry, in the defense sector, the service sector. What I have seen over decades is that most companies don't effectively manage their data infrastructure, don't fully leverage the data that they have to improve their decision-making, structured decision-making, ability to react quickly to incidents, ability to proactively manage risk, for example, in the context of digital supply chains. So very excited to be here and share my perspective in what can be done to improve supply chain operations. Everything I see across different industries is that most companies don't manage risk within supply chains in a structured form. So building on the case study that Govind was talking about, the Toyota case study, I will share some additional thoughts on what can be done to advance supply chains to reduce risk and also improve responsiveness and also promote cost efficiency.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Chinnam. That was a great introduction. Appreciate having you in this panel, and it's been great. And next, I would like to invite Dr. Albert Murad to come back and give a little bit of introduction of his background. He brings, just to let you know, guys, Dr. Murad brings out a tremendous experience, and he has really done some transformational work in terms of supply chain visibility. Please go ahead, Dr. Murad. You're on mute. You're on mute, Dr. Murad.
All right. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So hi, everyone. Thanks, Govind, for the introduction. I'm an associate professor in the Industrial and Systems Engineering Department at Wayne State University. My expertise is in building analytical solutions, mostly in the form of models, mathematical and computational models, that are used to understand the phenomenon that we see in supply chains and other business industries and business areas, as well as to make recommendations how they can be more effective, whether it be efficiency or more customer service and more optimized decisions. So I've been building these models and solutions for over 15 years, and my expertise spans across different areas, including supply chain management and healthcare delivery systems. And more recently, I've been working in the digital supply chain and digital process areas, mostly focusing on how do we automate, how do we discover these digital representations of the physical world using the state-of-the-art AI and machine learning techniques. Not just to understand, not just to be able to describe the physical world, but to be able to control. So my recent research focusing on these digitally driven discoveries that can be controlled and that can be used in what-if analysis. Sure.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Albert Murad. Appreciate it. Next, I would like to introduce one of the industries with person who has had tremendous experience in these areas from an industrial practical standpoint. And Mr. Obaidul Ghani, I think he is joining us from Florida. Hi, good afternoon, Ghani. Appreciate it if you can go back and give us a little bit of introduction about yourself and what you do.
Thank you, Govin. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone, regardless where you are. Again, I'm Obaidul Ghani. I'm based out of Gainesville, Florida. I've been working in operations and supply chain in the healthcare space, both in functional and transformational roles, business excellence as well. I spent about 4 or 5 years in automotive industry in Detroit, Michigan area. Then I transitioned to healthcare. So last 15 years, I have been in biomedical and biologics industry, working in FDA regulated industries. And as you know, healthcare industry is comparatively new in this field. Our concept of supply chain operational excellence, as far as industry maturity, tremendous opportunity there as far as applying those principles and seeing the result. I'm very excited to be here. Currently, I'm affiliated with IndustryX as fellow. Looking forward to share and learn in this forum. Looking forward to that. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ghani. Really appreciate it. And last but not the least, I would like to introduce Alham Tagizade. She is a PhD candidate at Wayne State University, and she has been doing some phenomenal, groundbreaking modeling and projects and transformational work at Wayne State. Hi, Alham. I would appreciate if you could go back and give yourself a quick introduction and talk about what you're doing.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alham Tagizade. I am PhD candidate at Wayne State University, Industrial Engineering. And my research interest is supply chain management, resilience network optimization. And currently I'm working on resilience management for global and complex supply network by looking at the more visibility and transparency. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to share some ideas and some new topics with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alham. Appreciate it. As you can all see, we have a powerhouse panel with people who bring great experience and great practical experience and theoretical experience. Also, they have done projects in terms of addressing some of the vulnerabilities that I talked about earlier in my listing. So I think this is going to be a phenomenal, fantastic webinar. And first of all, thanks, Paul, for joining. Now, I'm going to stop my screen sharing because we're going to deep dive on some of the discussions, points that we're talking about. And just to address the panel here, the first discussion point that I have, that what issues are we seeing, or what are we observing from the COVID disruption in supply chain? I know there has been a lot of disruption, but from your vantage point, if you can give us a quick thing, what you are seeing, that'll be awesome. I think first of all, I would like to say, I think Ghani talked about being in healthcare, and healthcare at this time during the COVID-19 is a very, very important topic, from PPE to vaccine, and there's a lot of research that's going on. So Ghani, I would say from your vantage point, because since you're in Florida, you are in healthcare, you are right in the middle of it. So please give us some pointers on what you're seeing during this COVID disruption to supply chain.
Thank you, Govin. So I'd like to share a few topics that I experienced and in the organization, how that we had to deal with that resiliency-wise, recovery-wise. I'd like to start with the first topic. Most recently I was with a startup company, and we are building into new facility. So as far as the construction supply chain, there's a major disruption. So it was really challenging to manage it. All aspect of different materials, building was able to finish, and also the clean room manufacturing, building it. Getting all those up and construction was extremely challenging. So we had to be very innovative to deal with that. And also looking at the finishing furniture supply chain, plants in Mexico, so they cannot provide any confirmed shipping date. Usually there are 6-7 weeks of lead time, but right now Mexico plant is closed. These are all real life experience. We cannot provide. Switching the vendor supplier, so what is closest we have that meets our specification, what we need, laboratory equipments, making biologics, things like that. So everything we had to deal with that, find a alternate solution, how we can acute that. There's a little bit of offset with the time, but team really worked hard to overcome the situation at the expense of some lead time and things. Also, unpredictable demand. So, starting from the general merchandise, tissue, toilet papers and things, Govind already told you, all know that. It's not only the cleaning supplies and the healthcare PPE, gloves, the latex gloves, mask, and all those, the demand was extreme spike there. How to deal with that? There are certain activities you cannot do in a biotechnology R&D lab, and also for medical production of all the biologics we are manufacturing, you cannot just do it. So that was extremely challenging to deal with that unpredictable spike. Suppliers cannot commit any confirmed shipping date to replenish our inventory. Next, I'd like to highlight the more very biologics aspect. As we all know, COVID is a biologics challenge for the whole world. Not only the supplies, drug design development, the vaccine development, in all aspects, the materials, even the COVID sample, the reagent, you carry the sample, and the testing capability was extremely challenging. All the resource capability was just being redirected to support the COVID. So we are in the middle of the very critical cell and gene therapy drug development. There's a called test. I'm sure you're all familiar, PCR, polymerase chain reaction. Exact same test being used for COVID testing. So all the resources, university research, and the third-party vendor we had was out of capacity. We cannot help you guys anymore. We are 100% dedicated for COVID testing. So that was extremely challenging. So this was dealing with that testing capability, the reagent testing, getting in from the suppliers, all got redirected to the COVID testing support, millions of kits manufactured. So all consumables related with the biotech testing, development, and producing the drug, reagent, chemical, biologics was under extreme pressure in this situation. So you have to be absolutely very innovative. I'll share later how to deal with
we will ask you that question. Hold on to that thought,
yes,
Ghani, because I think you got some great things to share in the next segment for us. So hold on to the thought. I think that is great. And I think I will now go to Dr. Murad, Albert Murad. I think you had a few things that I think we were talking outside this webinar the other day. You were talking about some trends that you're seeing. Maybe in a quick sentence or two, if you can talk about some trends that you saw, what you observed, and then we will talk about what industries did to address that. I think you had some good stories. So if you can mention one or two things, I appreciate that. You're on mute, Dr. Murad.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so companies were not prepared for this. I mean, we all know we weren't prepared for a pandemic, right? So what is different about this pandemic? First, it is the duration, right? It's not lasting a couple of weeks or days, it's lasting months, and we still don't see when it will end. The second, the companies were not prepared for the kind of impact a disruption would have on all ends of the supply chain, talking about supply, demand, as well as the production and the workforce. The third unique aspect about this pandemic is that, or the disruption is that it is not happening all at once. It is happening in stages. So first of the companies, mostly due to the disruption originating from China, a supply disruption. So supply shocks came in and companies were caught off guard and unprepared. Second came in the demand shock. So what we saw is a lot of hoarding, a lot of lockdown related large orders in the retail, in the consumer, but also in supply chains. And then we have been seeing what we call in supply chain context, the aftershocks in the form of bullwhip effects. And we are seeing it through the shortage gains and forward buying that a lot of companies are have been doing just as a way to ensure that they will have sufficient supply in their supply chain. And it's not just that these have come in stages, but they are also repeating pattern in waves. So we have seen shortages from the retail industry, the PPE and toilet paper towels. That was in March. And we have been seeing that in September and October. And who knows, maybe after the vaccine results come in, we will see another wave. So this kind of shock wave repetition is also taking place in supply chain. So in summary, companies were prepared for disruptions of hurricanes and trade disputes and supplier financial instability, but they were not prepared for a pandemic. They were not prepared, both ends and the core of their supply chain being impacted at the same time.
That's a great point. That's a great point, Dr. Murad. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. I think talking about that, I would talk a couple of things about my experiences. I work in automotive industry. And I work for a company called NEO. All our supply chain, think about it, all our supply chain was in China, not worldwide. Even in China, within China, we experienced disruption because majority of our parts came from certain provinces in China, which were under a more severe lockdown than other provinces. So what that did is, although our factory, which is in Anhui province in China, was ready to run, and they had parts, some of the critical parts could not come from a neighboring state, which is 200 kilometers away. So you have to be creative in doing how you produce these parts and transport it. And kind of, it took us some time. It took us a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to a month to kind of put in processes in place on how to safely produce a part, have there, build up the inventory needed, because these suppliers are also supporting other OEMs. So we saw a disruption, not just to us, not just intercontinental, also within a continent, within a state, within a country. So this had really wide-ranging impact. I think we'll talk more about this in the next one, maybe talk about what did the OEMs and suppliers and the industry did to, when they saw this pandemic, when they saw this raging thing, saw this lingering thing, what did they do to manage themselves or change their processes? So I would like to go back to some of the panel experts here to ask about what trends are we seeing? What are we seeing from this? I know we talked about the issues we saw. Now we talk about what trends are we seeing going forward that some of these OEMs are adopting. So let me go back to Ghani. Ghani, if you can please talk about a little bit about, maybe in a few sentences, or if you give us a summary, concrete examples of what you saw in terms of post-COVID that some of these OEMs are doing to make sure they're proofing themselves, COVID-19 proofing themselves.
Okay, thank you, Govin. So I'd share a few points in regards to the biologics industry. So what we did, so we went to the dual sourcing and alternate sourcing. So we really jumped in and started exploring what are the alternate sourcing opportunities we have and dual sourcing. So I was able to identify a couple of them and reduce some mitigation there. So however, that's the go forward strategy, constantly searching for alternate and dual sourcing. Then building in-house capability. I know this is not possible for all industry, don't have the infrastructure, raw material, automation. For biologics industry, there's a lot of generic equipments in the clinical room or laboratory environment. You could have if you have the right recipe, you could produce. So you started working on building in-house capability. Exactly the same example I shared earlier, the PCR, polymer chain reaction, exactly same testing being used for COVID testing. So we started working on it, qualifying, validating, and building in-house capability. Holistic 360-degree risk analysis. So this lesson is an extremely challenging situation, as we have seen in the past, and also biotech is even more challenging, and not losing the capacity in this case, demand is more of a gaining more demand, extraordinary demand here, and supporting the supply chain. So identify the risk item and building the in-house safety stock adjustment and how the consumption pattern, and realigning them with the alternate and dual sourcing, and also countering the building in-house capability, how soon you can get to that and use that. One more example I'm going to share, which is extremely exciting. You have seen that for COVID vaccine, General Parna shared that yesterday. It's already laid out, all the state government, they identified the geography and the populations and the vaccine. Absolutely, it's not that simple. I had some opportunity to work on some of the areas. COVID vaccine distribution supply chain is extremely challenging. There's a different, it cannot go by population or demographics only. There's a demand uncertainty as far as who is going to accept the vaccine. Still, there are a lot of confusion out there. You could ship all the vaccine there and people showing up 50% or less. That could be extremely challenging. You just don't have the capacity to hold those vaccine in the right temperature. And also the temperature controlness and how package size Moderna vaccine and versus Pfizer vaccine, there's a lot more numerous variables in the distribution supply chain. We are seeing that it's going to be extremely challenging journey for next several months, a year or so, to get this really flushed through and get to there. So those are the few areas, major areas organizations have been working both from supply sides and also the distribution aspect of the entire supply chain. So resiliency, visibility, digitalization, and faster response. So if somebody is not, one site is not administering enough COVID vaccine, you have to adjust the distribution chain right away to accommodate that change and not getting vaccine wasted. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it. I think you touched upon many of them. You touched upon resiliency, you touched upon visibility, but there are a couple of other things that you touched upon. You talk about, in-house capability. You talked about inventory, dual sourcing. I think in healthcare that might be a better option, but we have found that option not to be perfect in other industries. So here I would like to bring Dr. Chinnam to talk about, what do you think, since you have had a lot of experience in this area with, I think you had done a lot of research on the Toyota study and what, when they did some of these things and what the impact was. So if you could please shed some light on what do you see from COVID that was different from earthquake and what we should be doing forward. Appreciate that.
Govind, thanks for the question. Sure, so there's a lot we can learn by looking at how Toyota has approached this problem, nearly a decade ago, right? So you talked about the earthquake and the resulting tsunami and the significant disruption to Toyota, both within Japan as well as its global production facilities. So, Ghani was talking about the ability to potentially look at dual sources, increasing inventory, potentially increasing capacity. As you rightly commented, it's not one size fits all, and these strategies might not work for many industries and for many companies. So let me take a second to walk us through some of the concrete actions that Toyota has taken to sort of promote their network resilience, right? So first and foremost, they recognized that a lot of the risk often comes from not their immediate suppliers, but deep tier suppliers. There is a lot of evidence that over 50% of all the risk in supply chains often stems from outside your immediate suppliers. The reality is vast majority of the companies don't know much about who their tier 2 suppliers and tier 3 suppliers. And even if they know who they are, they don't really know where their facilities are located, what their vulnerabilities are, and so on and so forth. So Toyota, over a span of 3-4 years, developed a system they called Rescue, reinforced supply chain under emergency. And what did they do? Given their very close relationships with suppliers, they established a system where they are tracking 400,000 suppliers, 600,000 facilities, not just the tier 1s, but looking at the tier 2 suppliers, tier 3 suppliers. This is not easy for most of the companies located in North America, right? We don't have that kind of a Kiritsu kind of a system where you don't have that very healthy relationship with your suppliers to get them to reveal often confidential information about who their upstream suppliers are, and so on and so forth. But to be able to really understand network risk, to be able to effectively manage network risk, it is extremely important to understand what does your network look like, where are they located, what are their vulnerabilities, both financial, weather related, things of this sort. So Toyota has done a wonderful job of establishing this system, and that is the first step, right? First, you need to know what your network looks like and what your vulnerabilities look like. On top of that, they were working with the competition. Many parts that go into a vehicle are not seen by the customer. These are commodity parts. Toyota started working with the other Japanese OEMs to commonize a lot of these parts. So if I experience an event, I can potentially work with other suppliers that are supplying the same part to the competition. And very selectively did they ask the suppliers to hold, additional inventory. And the other thing that they have done is they started decentralizing purchasing and procurement. Prior to 2010, much of the procurement was heavily managed out of Japan. And that exposed risk because you are going after global single sources that increase vulnerabilities, within the supply chain. So they basically said, North America will primarily do its sourcing locally. Europe would primarily do sourcing locally, but selective parts like major engines and things of that sort, Japan would still manage the sourcing for these critical subsystems. So it was a very tailored, deliberate approach, and that is what we need. Simply suggesting that we should do, local sourcing, carry more inventory, add more capacity, things of this sort are not practical for vast majority of the companies. And I can talk a little more about, so Govind, you commented on this, right? This is what they have done from 2011 to 2015, and then they experienced another earthquake. The response was much quicker, but there are still a number of shortcomings, and we can talk more about that a little later.
I think, thank you very much, Dr. Chinna. I think here talking about, resiliency is an area where there could be, there is being more work done, I believe, and I think we have done a little bit more work in trying to using our latest technologies and using some our data analysis, data science to understand more of the risk with this tier 2 and tier 3 that you mentioned, talked about. And I believe, Alham, if you could talk a little bit about maybe what you have done, or what do you think we have the opportunities in terms of improving resilience and the studies that you're pursuing and you're doing, the models that you're running. They'll appreciate that.
Yes, for sure. For my research that collaborate with Ford Motor Company, we found that most supply chain manager and leaders, just for resilience, they rely on tier 1 suppliers. They thought that if they have a reliable tier 1 supplier, they can say that they have the maximum level of the resilience for whole of the network. But what we have done, we mapped the network for one commodity for Ford Motor Company beyond the tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers. Because we can see as like COVID, more than like half of the disruption came from the tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. So we show that by looking at more visibility or transparency beyond the tier 1 suppliers, you can have a more accurate resilience level of your network. And if the supply manager just rely on tier 1 supplier, they will have the overestimation of their resilience. So it is essential the company supply chain manager leaders start to map the network beyond the tier 1 supplier up to tier 3 to find that which supplier can be more vulnerable, which one can be potential, or gonna be a good hint for the leaders to make decisions regarding about sourcing, inventory, buffer, or transportation route or transportation map. So it is important for them to also look at the network flow, inventory flow beyond the tier one suppliers. So we show that, yes, by looking at a more transparency or visibility beyond tier one supplier, suppliers, manager, and leaders can have more accurate resilience and help them to manage the inventory sourcings and find some potential suppliers.
Thank you very much, Alham. I think you talked a lot about, I think you gave us a lot of insight about resilience. I think talking about resilience from you and Dr. Chinnam, I think this could be one of our webinar topics in future, because it looks like this has got tremendous potential and also to help with OEMs. Definitely. I think, hey, audience, I would like you guys to put your question in the chat. I'm going to come back to you after one of the panel questions, because I want to see what you guys are also seeing post-COVID. In the meantime, Dr. Murad, I'd like to bring you and ask you about, I think there are some companies that really survived this COVID pandemic better than others using digital technologies. Can you just give us maybe in a quick sentence before we involve the evidence of, I think you had some examples that we were talking about offline, that you can talk about the companies that really survived and came through better through this pandemic.
Right, Govind. There are, so first off, all the companies are impacted. It's across the board. So the question is not about not impacted. The question is, how do they minimize the impact? How do they reduce the bottom line cost and loss of profit? So one company that has been successfully in minimizing the impact is Nike. Nike is a primarily China sourced company, a global company. Their supply chain extends globally, and they do have many contract manufacturers located in China. So Nike has been a core leader in digitizing their supply chains across their business units, and also investing in other business areas, digital transformation or other business areas. But primarily in supply chain, they have been very much successful. And during this COVID, they have reaped the benefits of that digitization of their supply chain. How they did that is one instance, for example, around the time frame of March to April, after seeing how this impact of the COVID is propagating in their demand and supply network, they have taken actions to route their flows of shipments from brick and mortar stores that were soon shut down and closed to e-commerce fulfillment centers across the globe. And that has allowed them to avoid a lot of costly transshipments and pulling back the inventory and become more responsive. The second thing that they were able to do is using this agility that is provided through the digital transformation to quickly allocate their marketing resources, and marketing strategies are revised to be able to promote the products not available, but those products that are actually available in physical inventory, which we know in the supply chain context is revenue management, demand shaping, and encouraging, incentivizing substitution as much as they can. So that has allowed them to reduce the impact on the sales. So these two examples of the benefits of digital supply chains enabled through increased visibility and faster to action and decision making, and translating those decisions to actions has allowed them to respond better. So
Thank you very much. I think that is fantastic. I think you have given us a great. Sorry to interrupt you there,
Sure.
but I think you have given us a great feedback on what a company like Nike did using the digital transformation to reduce the impact of the COVID-19 here, and that's fantastic. And just to let you know, the audience, our panelists here, if you look at Dr. Alpert, Dr. Chenham, Alham, they have tremendous experience with creating models, with data science, and they are able to help all kinds of organizations to how to get to the digital transformation wave and get on it and make themselves more productive, more efficient. So talking about it, I think we have talked about resiliency, right? So in the closing comment, I want to get audience involved. Please put your questions on the side in the chat. We have seen talk about resiliency, which is key, and we're going to have a separate webinar on resiliency. We talked about digital transformation, which is very, very important, right? And we talked about visibility. That means all your systems to be interconnected, so you can have a good visibility all the way to through your systems, through your manufacturing process, and your demand planning is linked to it. Your whole supply with inventory, with tier 2, tier 1, everybody is linked, so you can have a good view to make your decision. What the visibility does exactly is to make the right decisions and make the decisions quickly, so that you don't get into a jam where you end up with no inventory or excess inventory or shutdown. And I think Dr. Chenham talked about a little bit centralization and decentralization, how it works and when it works. Centralization, and some companies move to decentralization. That is not the solution. So I think you guys talked about decentralization with a central lead works better in many of the cases, right? I think we talked about it. So at this time, I would like to say in kind of combining some of the gems that you guys brought about, is that supply chain innovation will be essential, and collaboration among the value chain will be an enabler for future business successes. We know that is need to happen, right? And what is the journey from a lockdown to the new normal? And then to the new resiliencies will require a reassessment of today's supply chain based on a change environment and a potential new set of priorities that we need to move forward. And here, the reason, audience, you guys see is our panel is everybody is completely capable to advise and help you hold your hand to move forward, to implement some of these so that we can ride the wave of the next disruption. So I think I'll take, in the meantime, Noman, is it okay for me to take some questions that are on the chat panel from the audience to go back and maybe have some of our panel experts provide answers for?
Sure. I think Sam has some good ideas about the use of blockchain. So maybe let's hear from Sam about blockchain.
Yeah, hi guys. Thanks again for a great discussion today. I see a couple of my colleagues are on too. I think blockchain, Ratna, you gave me some answers to this in the whole kind of supply chain linkage, decisions, procurement. You talked about Toyota's kind of commodity parts consolidations with other suppliers, which all plays into this. I'd like to kind of expand the question, if I can, though, Norman, to the kind of the bigger impacts on what is the new normal. And as an example, we know that China now dominates the production of steel for the world. With all these events going on, do we see more kind of regionalization playing back in? Are we more kind of trepidatious about giving monopolies to certain regions? What are your thoughts around that context?
Excellent question, Sam. I believe, Trump administration, right? When Trump, started in 2016, he basically said, we need to do something about bringing back jobs to North America. He was not necessarily thinking in terms of, resilience of the local communities, right? He wasn't thinking from that angle. He was just basically thinking the eroding manufacturing know-how, right? And one interesting example was when Trump came to power, he was challenging CEOs from companies like Apple. So Apple wanted to bring back the production of their top-end computer, the Mac Pro, right? They wanted to build their flagship computer in the US. And what was interesting is there was a Wall Street article, I believe, talking about the difficulty in securing suppliers for some of the most trivial parts, such as precision screws. They could not find a reliable supply base for producing precision screws at volume, at quality, and on time, right? And then they realized that basically we have significantly eroded manufacturing expertise in many areas. I mean, think about Michigan, right? Tool and die, right? There used to be 3,000, 4,000 tool and die manufacturing companies in Michigan, and we now have barely a couple of hundred, right? We have lost a lot of that expertise, right?
Yeah.
So the resilience, how to promote community resilience and what is the right approach is an outstanding question, Sam. And I'm not sure. Country as a whole needs to think about this very strategically, and what is the role of the private sector, what is the role of the government, and how do we promote this resilience so we don't experience these kinds of issues going forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ratna. I think, again, the topic of resiliency, we don't hear that term too often, but it's a reality that how do we kind of ride the waves, economic cycles, natural catastrophe, etc. And I think, again, just an opinion, I think we've opened up ourselves to be exposed to these challenges more so than we have in the past, just by kind of macroeconomics. And how we kind of roll that back a little bit or take another look at it, I think is a critical thing as we move forward. So thank you for your response.
Sure, Sam.
Yeah, I think, Sam, I think that you hit the nail on the head. Thank you for that question, and thank Dr. Chinnam for answering it. I think this talks about borders on the regionalization and how to procure your inventory that is critical to your production. I think that was a great example, Dr. Chinnam, you gave of the steel. Slowly over the last 20 years, we have made China's world's manufacturer, and we have sourced all our capability, our competency to China. I think some of it will revert back. I think some of it will move back based on what it makes sense for each country to make sure that they are more resilient. So the resiliency is not just adding that safety factor for where to get your material from. What we are saying in this panel for audience is we are talking about more things that you need to do. Resiliency is for securing your inventory. On top of it, having a digital transformation that you have visibility. And then also looking at what you can do in terms of talent and leadership within an organization in supply chain to bring this all together. That's what we are here to discuss about. It's not just one solution fits all for everybody. It is different things that we need to do. And that's why we are here as IndustryX to help you move in that direction.
Yeah, I think also, again, in open discussion, the talent drain as well. I think at this point, we've got 4 generations, maybe even 5, that we're leaning on for different levels of experience, but we are kind of seesawing back and forth between, is it innovation and new ideas versus do we understand the business, the acumen of how a business operates? So I think that is also in this kind of bracket. So again, I won't monopolize, but thank you for your insights and input today.
Thank you very much.
Noman, you wanted to say something?
No, I think it's a very interesting discussion, and we are almost out of time. But I just want to say maybe just a few words. One is, in this environment, agility and the mindset is key. These problems are difficult problems, and we need to be mindful and we need to be agile in this environment. Okay, that's number one. Second thing is, I want maybe regarding manufacturing, I think the model of maybe shipping jobs overseas and maybe move more towards a service type of economy. I think many countries and the countries where the service was the leading industry, they are realizing that they still need manufacturing. They still need to produce things because manufacturing is the backbone. Operations is the backbone of country in terms of how they operate and to be self-sufficient about doing things. So I think what manufacturing will be back. Manufacturing will be back in a very strong way, but we need to leverage technology, and this is what we are focusing through IndustryX also, is bringing the discussion back to this, that we need manufacturing, we need operations, but how can we use technology? And that's where I think as my a couple of points. But thank you, Govind, for the wonderful discussion and all the panelists. We're out of time. If you have any questions or comments, please let us know. Reach out to us, info@industryx.org. We're also available on LinkedIn. Connect with us. So with this, thank you. Govind, you want to say something?
No, I think Noman's, thank you very much. I think we are kind of out of time, but I think the discussion has been very, very productive, a great discussion. I think you talked about agility and mindset, which could be a complete topic on how we look at technology implementation. How do we choose the right technology? How do we get our organizations geared towards application and technology? Agility and mindset plays a very, very key role. I think there are a few things we talked about. I think I would have liked to expand it more on Alper's about capacity building and how do we get better response. And Dr. Chinnam and Alham talked about resilience. And these are good topics for us in the future webinars. I would also like to say that please stay tuned. There are additional topics we're going to bring in. We're going to bring in modeling. We're going to bring in automation. We're going to talk about supply chain visibility, which will be standalone topic on its own in the future webinars. And that's all. I would like to really thank the panel, appreciate their time, and thanks, Norman.
Thank you very much, and we'll be back with some more action. And until then, thank you, and God bless you, and have a great holidays, and we'll see you back. Thank you.
Thank you very much.